Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody can hear us. Welcome to the AREAA Commercial State of Commercial Real Estate. We're glad to have all of you today. And this is Naveen Pathnagay, the AREAA Commercial Chair. And we have some great speakers today. We've got Neil Sherman, who is the Managing Director of Sperry Commercial in Arizona. We've got Kevin Chin, who is the Managing Director of SVN, Pacific Commercial Advisors. And we have Marty Lefton, who's a strategic commercial mortgage broker and owner of SV Commercial Lending. We have a great event for you. I just wanted to step back for a second before the introductions of all these people here. I wanted to talk a little bit about why we're doing this. We're in hard times right now. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of flux in the market. Our goal was to see what we can do to share our knowledge and all our connections that we have nationwide and all the members of AREAA nationwide. We wanted to bring together an event where we can talk and share everything that's going on nationwide. And without further ado, I'd like to sort of go to, let me see here. Wanted to go to Kevin. And Kevin, do you want to say a little bit about you and what you're doing in your area? Just a quick intro, and then I'll just have each of you introduce each other, and then we'll sort of get into the meat and potatoes of this.
Sure. Thank you, Naveen. Good afternoon, AREAA family. I'm the Managing Director for SVN Pacific Commercial Advisors here in San Francisco, California. SVN is a national commercial real estate company with offices in 200 markets across the country. The bulk of our work, of our office handles is about 75% investment sales of multifamily and retail properties through the greater Bay Area. And we also do landlord and tenant rep for office and retail space, and that makes up the bulk of our business. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And Marty, you want to say a little bit about you and what you're doing right now? And
Sure. Yeah, I'm Marty Lefton. I'm a strategic commercial mortgage broker out of the Silicon Valley. I do lending throughout the U.S. In pretty much all the food groups. And that's fairly simple. I'm a one-man show, so I don't have this big corporation behind me.
Thank you, Marty. And then Neil, you want to say all the wonderful work you're doing in Arizona, or nationwide, actually. I should say Arizona.
Good afternoon. The first thing I'm going to say is I'm so glad I didn't use the Golden Gate Bridge. I was going to use that today for my background. I have that. I love that, but I didn't go with it, and now I see it's a good thing. But anyway, good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:03 here in beautiful Phoenix. I would tell you the temperature, but I can't tell. It's just hot.
The 115, Neil.
What's that?
The 115. I was just outside.
Yeah, I didn't check. I've been in the conference room for the last few hours, but I'm looking outside and it looks hot. But anyway, so I'm the managing director of the Sperry Commercial Office here in Phoenix, technically Sperry Commercial Insignia CRE. I see that our esteemed Jim Huang is on the call, our fearless leader. And I know there are some other Sperry Commercial attendees who have joined in. So I'm happy to be a part of the panel. I've been here I've been in Arizona since 1980. I moved here to go to ASU. Been in the commercial real estate business since 1985. Seen a lot, I think, and done a lot, but nothing that would have prepared anyone for what happened in the last few months here and what's continuing to happen. So it's going to be an interesting call.
No, thank you, Neil. Thank you. I wanted to sort of let everybody know kind of the agenda of what we're going to do today, so you kind of all prepare for yourself too. And we'll hear from our panelists today just as to what's going on. And the reason, again, I call it the past, the present, and the future of commercial real estate, because the past has been wonderful. And we all think, and I know people say, hey, we're always getting better. It is getting better. And I think that I wanted to see what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future. Of course, we can't predict the future, but the goal is to at least see where things are today and where some of our panelists today, what have they done in the past and what's going on now and what are they seeing and what are the potentiality of what's happening in the future. So that's sort of what it'll be sort of an open forum, but I wanted to keep question and answers towards the end. So if you have any questions, if you would want to, I believe we can do a Q&A at the end, but I'd like to see if you can write your questions in, and we can definitely have that answered towards the end. And of course, I can't promise everyone that we'll answer all the questions, but I'll pick some questions that we can ask the panelists. And without further ado, I want to start with Kevin. Kevin, I wanted to see what's happening in your market, or what was happening in your market. And I know we talked a little bit about you talking on the multifamily side, but please tell us a little bit more about, what you saw, pre-COVID, sort of during COVID, and what's going on now. And that way, we kind of get a temperature of what's happening in your market.
Sure. Thanks, Naveen. The year started off, San Francisco Bay Area was like the center of the tech universe. So we had, record employment, and multifamily transactions were almost 30% up year over year for the first 4 months of the year. Then we had COVID, and everything kind of just came to a screeching halt. The rent collections have been pretty steady pretty steady and good for the first 3 months of the pandemic, but with unemployment insurance running out, the job picture not getting better, July has come in with collections down below the previous 3 months. So we're seeing job losses, layoffs. All these things are going to cause household deformation and obviously rents to drop.
Okay. And do you see in some of in the market you are, what are the other project types that you're working on that you can kind of see what was happening before and what's currently going on, just in terms of, do you see, just any other markets you're in also as part of, your transactions that you're working on?
Well, in the retail business, most stores have been shut down except for restaurants that had takeout business and essential services, which is groceries, hardware stores, things like that, drug stores. And those businesses have done fairly well during the pandemic. But the concern is that with PPP money running out, a lot of these small businesses may not be able to reopen without extreme help from their landlords.
Okay. And Marty, what kind of deals were you seeing last year and sort of pre-COVID? And then what sort of deals were you seeing just sort of right when we were getting into this pandemic? And what I know we'll talk kind of about present, and then we'll kind of go back into the future, but what were the things you were looking at?
Well, last year was fairly simple, especially when you look at it now. But pretty much lending in all food groups, hotels were strong, and there was a lot of stuff going well. And then you got to a little bit, you started deals prior to the pandemic hits, and then anything like a strip center, retail, now you were in major chaos. And if it was a purchase, for the most part, those died. A few of them were renegotiated, but struggling, especially on the strip centers. Those did not do well because, again, most of the tenants were no longer in the strip center. They were now working from home and had no revenue, especially at the early part of the pandemic. We got some things done. Multifamily still is strong and was still working. And it's strange how you can take the exact same case to, let's say, several lenders, and because I just did this yesterday on a deal, and I was looking at 5-year fixed money, and it was anywhere from 2.86% 5-year fixed up to 4.5%. And that tells you how different the financial institutions are seeing things. It's a bizarre thing. So you really have to be careful right now because it's all bets off. And we talked about it when we were having a discussion today, all of us. And there's just a lot of things that can go wrong, and you're going to have, it's just so early in the pandemic, it's very difficult for a lot of the financial institutions to know exactly what they want to bet on.
No, that I know a lot of the banks, we've got several clients of ours that are bankers as well. And it's been a different industry, and different things going on right now. And I think the banks have shifted focus as well in terms of how they're trying to generate revenue on their own. Neil, do you want to talk about some of the deals you had last year and pre-COVID, and then sort of during the COVID time, what was going on? That way we can kind of share an idea of what's going on in your market as well, or in our market here.
Thanks, Naveen. And, while Kevin and Marty were speaking, I couldn't help, I have this news feed that I look at every single day for commercial bankruptcies, retail bankruptcies, and so on. It's kind of a morbid curiosity, but you never know. Some of these retailers and commercial businesses are not in malls and shopping centers. They own their own real estate, and there could be an opportunity if you could get in early enough to, maybe do a real estate deal or two. So, it's funny, I'm looking at this list, and I know this wasn't exactly what you asked me, but, me personally, when I start to see companies like Brooks Brothers, J.C. Penney, J. Crew, Neiman Marcus, Gold's Gym, Hertz, for God's sake, and then others, Chuck E. Cheese, GNC, 24 Hour Fitness, lucky if I didn't say lucky, Sur La Table, I think was the one I just saw on my news feed this morning. If those guys can file bankruptcy at the drop of a hat, and I realize it's not exactly a drop of a hat, a lot goes into that. But, I think that there's another shoe that's going to drop, and maybe another few shoes that are going to drop before this is all over. These are, some of these companies are 100 plus years old, some are less than that. But some of these are the top retailers in the United States that we're all used to seeing when we drive down the street and pass a shopping center or we go to a mall. So these guys have had to file bankruptcy because they can no longer function with their current business model. And most of them probably can't pay their rent, and they don't want to be shut down. So to me, it's just unbelievably fascinating if you just track the bankruptcies on a regular basis. That's a real sad state of affairs. In terms of, pre-COVID, through COVID, or now I should say during COVID and then post-COVID, I've said this before on other calls, I'll just say it again very quickly. For those of us who have been doing this for a while, we never, ever, ever saw a market like we've seen in the last 10, 12 years. There's nobody that can say they've been doing this for 20, 30 or more years who can say that they've seen a nonstop increase in prices and a nonstop decrease in cap rates like we've seen over the last 10, 12 years. It's historical, it's unprecedented. And for people like myself and other brokers and a ton of my clients, we were all scratching our heads and saying, my gosh, what's it going to take to put a damper on this, to get this to maybe reverse and maybe go back the other way a little bit? Because not everybody likes paying full retail, and not everybody likes paying it, buying at 3, 4 cap rates, 5 cap rates even. So there was a lot of speculation as to what that would look like that would finally come along to put the brakes on this market. Nobody could have possibly imagined it would be COVID-19, but that is what it was, and it has effectively put the brakes on the market. It sent retailers into a tailspin. It sent hoteliers into a tailspin. And, industrial, multifamily, and office are hanging in. Well, office maybe not so much, but industrial and multifamily seem to still be the darlings of the commercial real estate market. I think a lot of office buildings and a lot of office building owners are trying to figure out what that's going to look like when we come out the other side of this. Our business took a hit, probably just like everybody's on the phone. I mean, anybody who does residential, that's a different story. But anybody who specializes in commercial, I don't know how you didn't take a hit over the last 5 months. the world has changed. I liked what Kevin said the other day. They're doing a lot of lease renegotiations and that type of work. Well, we're not doing any of that work. So, you know, we don't have that potential income stream. And I'm assuming that that is a paying a task. But, you know, we tend to deal with the four main food groups: office, retail, industrial, multifamily. Throw hotels in there because we've had some success with a handful of hotels, and then throw land in there. We've had a lot of success with land, but you know, developers, at least most of the properties we're working on, aren't developing to the extent they were before. There are exceptions, and hotels are, you know, they've taken it on the chin, and frankly, so is retail. So you know, we're trying to, you know, hold our own. We're still selling apartments. We still have a couple of hotel deals we're chasing, and a couple of other commercial properties, but we're having to reinvent ourselves just like everybody else around the country and on this call are having to reinvent themselves. Marty hit the nail on the head the other day, I think, when he said that, you know, when you approach a deal now, you have to approach it a lot differently. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you know, you can't just slam these things together anymore like a lot of brokers used to do. It takes a lot more work, a lot more research. You really have to understand your buyers. You really have to understand your sellers. You have to understand the lenders' take on this whole thing. I think deals are going to take a little bit longer to put together. And a lot of the deals that were on the market going into COVID and still on the market, I think they're just not going to sell. They make no sense whatsoever. They made very little sense before COVID. They make even less sense now. So there's some of my 2 cents worth, Naveen.
Sure. So let me go back to you, Neil. I know you mentioned land transactions and some of these things. My firm, multidisciplinary architectural development firm, we basically look at all kinds of projects, doing lots of adaptive reuse. We're doing lots of new developments on the multifamily side. And these are not owners that recently bought, but although we are looking at doing a lot of new pre-applications for land that's been actually they're in kind of on the verge of, and I know a lot of lending is happening in terms of really low interest rates. So people are taking advantage of that. And we've had a lot of infill projects that have stayed there for a while that are now being sold because people want to get out as fast as possible. Are you seeing any kind of land transactions on your end, Neil?
Well, great question. We have a couple of deals under contract that, you know, I don't know if you can hear that, I'm knocking on wood. A great example would be a 12-acre piece we have in the Southeast Valley that you and I may have actually spoken about in the past. You know, I was crossing my fingers and praying that, you know, rubbing Buddha's belly, as my dad used to say, that deal wouldn't cancel, because the lender was on the fence to begin with before COVID. And I thought, please don't go away. I don't know what'll happen to that deal. Well, fast forward, the lender's hanging in there. The buyer's hanging in there. They have some non-refundable money up. And that's an example of a 12-acre piece in the heart of Chandler that is approved for 162 units. It happens to be wrapped by a site twice that size that PV Bell already purchased, and they're coming out of the ground with about twice as many units. It's altogether going to be a 500 and some odd units. So that's an example of a project that did not die. Neither one of them died. Both lenders hung in there. And again, knock on wood, I think our project will close here in the next couple of months. I like to take a day a week, or sometimes a couple of half days a week, and drive the entire valley. Sometimes I'll do just West Valley, sometimes just Southeast Valley, sometimes maybe just Scottsdale, whatever. And it's mind-blowing. First of all, the projects that were already coming out of the ground and that the construction, you know, crews basically just abandoned because of social distancing and COVID-19 and all, I'm seeing them back at the projects. You know, one example would be a nationwide project up on the 101 near Desert Ridge. Those guys all but disappeared for a few months, and now you drive by, they're all back. They're putting the glass in the building. I don't know if they have any tenants, but it's a beautiful building. And Nationwide, you know, is a big owner that probably pays cash for everything. So I guess they can afford to have an empty building for a while. But besides, you know, of those few, I'm seeing some new ones, and Naveen, you're probably seeing more of this since you're an architect. I'm seeing some new deals just breaking ground now that were put on hold when COVID hit. And I guess the lenders are still there, or they found new lenders, and the developers are still developing. So I see they're now moving dirt, and those projects look to be moving forward again.
Yeah.
You know, we've
Have you,
managed to keep a few of ours. We lost a few right off the bat, but we've managed to keep a few going, and we're working on a couple of new ones.
good, good. And Marty, are you seeing any kind of land transaction or land financing going on, or was
I
there
don't
something?
play. I don't really play that much in that arena. I figured out a long time ago that you architects and developers, those are long lead times, and ends up eating a lot of my time. So, I've seen, obviously it's Silicon Valley. We have lots of development going on, and then we had lots of the different sites COVID hit. And so it's the same problem everybody's having all throughout the US, which is how do you manage reopening whatever your business is, whether it's construction or baseball or, whatever it may be. It's such a bizarre time, and you got this push me, pull you situation going on, which is we've got to get the economy going, and yet we've got to stay safe. And I'm not sure I'm answering your question. I mean, it's basically.
No, that's okay. It's good to know because it's all about sharing. It's all about sharing. What's happening in certain markets, correct? So I think it's not just about what you're doing, but also what are you seeing in there. And then, moving to Kevin, have you seen any kind of land transactions, or are you guys involved in land at all, or is that?
We do some land. What I've seen in the San Francisco Bay Area, there are a lot of sites that were entitled by developers, but not started because construction costs have been so high. Maybe now that will change a little bit, but a lot of those sites were put on the market, and people were trying to cash out of it. I mean, the entitlement process in the Bay Area, depending on what municipality you're in, is a long haul. I mean, San Francisco, you could be 5 years before you get an approval on building a multifamily building.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of changes nationwide. We're licensed in many states, but I think as people are moving to online submittals and things like that, and we're really seeing that's being streamlined more and more. It started off very slow, but I think some of the approval processes right now, which should have been this way before COVID, but I think a lot of cities have closed, city halls have closed for any kind of submittals. And we're seeing that there's a lot faster answer from a lot of these people, which is a good thing. And I hate to tout our own city's horn, but I can tell you for a fact, City of Phoenix is amazing to work with. I'm licensed in 22 states. We've worked in so many different cities, and I can tell you for a fact, I will take City of Phoenix to work with any day. They are so responsible. They're so responsive, and it's been one of the best cities for me to work in. Of course, we in the metro area, we've got other places, but even within that. But no, I know we talked when we met earlier on a few days ago. We were discussing different things, Kevin, and I think you had mentioned that you were dealing with your tenants that you had, or your clients and the tenants and the workouts. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what are you doing in the multifamily space?
Well, in multifamily, the workouts were basically the tenants that didn't want to pay just said, well, it's COVID, we can't pay, we're laid off or we're not working. Though the funny part is that they're probably collecting unemployment, and with the $600 a week federal assistance add-on to unemployment, they were probably making more money than that when they were working. But
Yeah.
uh,
The
so
segment on NPR this morning about that. The money's running out, and they're trying to say, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to go find a job now.
yeah, and that's why July collections have gone down, because that money is running out. And that's multifamily was a little insulated from the shock initially, but I think they will gradually feel the pain like everyone else.
Okay.
In terms of retail negotiations, a lot of big chains we own some Burger Kings, and my clients own various other retailers. Almost everyone got a letter saying we're not going to pay rent on March 31st, and said we're not going to pay April's rent. And some said we'll pay it back later. Some said please forgive it for us for a few months. And you know, and depending on the tenant, if they filed bankruptcy or not, you know, the negotiations went kind of on a one-off basis, depending on the situation and how they did at those spaces.
Hey, Naveen.
Yeah.
Kevin's reference to the tenants is interesting, because one of the deals that I closed, I don't know, it feels like it's about a month ago now. All the tenants were doing really well. They were national tenants, and they weren't in hardship, and they were asking for concessions. And so what has happened is it's almost like the leases don't matter. We've kind of gotten this, there's a new time, which is, wait, I can choose not to pay and nobody's going to stop me from not paying. I mean, and that's the danger right now. And that's part of the reason why lenders are so concerned, is that's why many lenders say, okay, you need 6 months of payments in an account with us, or 12 months. Multifamily, they're nicer about in general. But again, it's amazing, because some of the big names we know out there, you know, even though they have long-term leases, they're saying, yeah, we'd like to, you know, modify our lease. And it puts the landlords in a very tough situation.
Yeah, I think I was telling you guys on Tuesday that I just signed a 10-year lease in February, you know, good to, and I'm thinking about it, is like, do I go back to my landlord? And then they came in and checked in my office the other day. I think we were discussing that. It's like, are you really running an office out of this space? Which was kind of like, wow, this is like, sure, I signed the lease, I'm going to be here. What else am I going to be doing? So, but anyway, that's kind of crazy. I wanted to go back to, are any of you seeing anything on the assisted living side? Has there been any movement on any sort of assisted living, or is there, you know, any kind of conversions any of you are seeing, or any clients interested in buying certain different types of property in terms of adaptive reuse? Or
Hey, Naveen, I'll add one thing very quickly. We had, and it's just us, so it's not reflective, I don't think, of the country as a whole, but we had 2 assisted living sites under contract, and when COVID-19 hit, they canceled those contracts fairly quickly. I mean, it wasn't the very beginning of the pandemic, but it certainly wasn't, you know, a month ago. It was maybe a month and a half into it. And when I was speaking to the gentleman, it was the same buyer, 2 different sites. When I was speaking with the gentleman, he said, you know, paraphrase, we have absolutely no idea what's going on, where this is going, how deep it's going to get, and so on. We don't need these sites. So, you know, we'll come back to you after COVID-19 is over, whenever the heck that is. But they basically just canceled. And they had to do that because they were, you know, getting close to having a couple $100,000 up non-refundable on each site. I asked them, why don't you just ask for an extension? Because that's what everybody else was doing. And he said, that's just kicking the can down the road. We just, you know, we don't know what the world holds for us or something like that right now. So kicking the can down the road 3-4 months, you know, probably isn't going to make a difference. You know, call us when this is over and we'll let you know if we're still interested. Well, as we all know, when this is over, it could be a year from now. We just don't know. So they're gone, and so are those 2 projects.
Well, and it's going to happen nationwide. I think, you know, the expectations of the duration of this has been so unforeseen. And I think initially people thought, oh, this is going to be a few months. We're going to reopen the states and, you know, everything is going to be going okay. And unfortunately, we're in an election year coming up, and it's just, there's so many uncertainties that I'm sure that a lot of people are unsure of what's happening and what's going to happen and what kind of government we're going to see next year. And that uncertainty usually, you know, creates certain tensions too. And some people want to get certain things done right away, or some people just want to wait and see what's going on next year to see, hey, can we really do this next year as to going on? So, and I know we're going to have some other events talking about different things, but have you guys had any buyers that have looked into, they had 1031 exchanges that they needed to make, or they had certain timelines? I know that got extended. Can any of you talk a little bit about that, or have you had any clients that were looking into different different areas of investments or different parts of the states? Marty, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that are under the gun because what do we got here? 6 days, I think, for a lot of them until the exchange timeline. I mean, one of our AREAA members is on the call. I won't say his or her name, but they're one of the ones looking at that. So they're starting to ask questions about, Delaware statutory trusts and, looking at the opportunity zones again and trying to figure out, hey, are those valid avenues just because of the pressures?
Yeah.
Naveen, yeah, we had a deal we were marketing, and we had it in contract pre-COVID with a 1031 buyer. It was ID'd by him. He went down the road. And when COVID hit, we extended out a couple of times. But at the end of the day, he's just said there's too much uncertainty, and he dropped out and opted to pay the taxes.
Yeah, yeah. And just to add, I encourage all the attendees online. There's a great Zoom webinar chat going on. I encourage all of you to sort of network. All your names are on, and if there's anything that you're going on, the whole purpose of this is to bring all the commercial people together, just to say, or any buyers or sellers that you have. Just if there's certain things, the whole point of this is to sort of network and kind of give you guys knowledge of what's happening nationwide. And I see some good things going on here, which is good. So keep going, and you can directly, text people within or chat with the people directly. And then of course, I'm not seeing any Q&A coming up. So there's also a Q&A section in this. If there's any questions you guys have specifically for the panel, please, there's a tab down on there that says Q&A. So tab on those, and you can probably get your questions there, and we'll figure out how to answer those too. Marty, Neil, did you want to say anything?
No, I was just going to say, and again, I'm speaking from my own vantage point, but I have to imagine that other people on the panel and around the country are experiencing the same thing. When you're talking about 1031 exchanges, we do a lot of 1031 exchange business, well, at least we used to. And, my take on that is if the property is already in escrow, and if the buyer has indicated they're still moving forward. So if the buyer had 50 grand non-refundable, or 100,000, or even 25,000, maybe not 25, because I've seen people walk on small amounts of earnest money because they just changed their mind. But if they have a considerable amount of earnest money, non-refundable already, and they're moving forward with the transaction, then the seller may very well want to do a 1031 exchange. They probably don't have much of a choice. They're in already. They have to complete the transaction or pay the taxes. But what we have found is if the deal's not already under contract, even if it was listed, but it's not already under contract, we have found a lot of sellers either A, canceling the listing, or B, not putting the property on the market at all, for the simple fact that they know if they keep the listing in place, we're probably going to put it under contract, and they're going to be forced to go find a replacement property, and they don't want to. Or if they were going to list the property, they change their mind for the same reason. If they go ahead with the listing, then they may put themselves in a position where they're going to be forced at some point to go find a replacement property. And I do think a lot of people on the buy side are probably a little leery of what's going to happen and when. And to be forced to go buy something now, if you think about it, only to find maybe that price changed in 6 months or a year from now, then they're going to wish they had just held on. So I think there's a lot of analysis paralysis or deer in the headlights type of thing going on right now, where if you're not already on the market, well, there's no harm in just not doing anything. I mean, not doing anything could be the safest avenue for a lot of these people. And that's what we're seeing a lot now.
So is that the cash is king concept? Is try to keep the cash for now and wait. But I belong to several other mentorship groups too, and one of my mentors was a past mayor of Phoenix, Paul Johnson, and great guy. They've been into development for years, and these people are picking up properties like you can't even imagine. I'm very impressed with what they have. And the last call I was on, they're like, look, banks are at the lowest rate you can ever get right now. Try to get as much HELOC as possible that you can get. And if there's property for sale, just take it. And I don't know. I mean, what are your feeling, guys? I mean, you know, of course, you know, I have a saying my mom told me before is like, you should only spread your bed sheet as far as it can go. And that's the only thing that can cover you in the end. So I've always taken that philosophy. So never extend beyond what you can is kind of the gist of it. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think what Neil was talking about is, you know, what usually happens when there's a recession and a change in the cycle. You know, the gap between buyer and seller becomes too huge, and the market becomes illiquid. And you know, until sellers capitulate to what buyers will pay, no transactions happen.
Marty, Neil?
Yeah, the one thing I've seen is, I think before the COVID, there was like a real tendency for like a single family investor, or they had a fourplex. And it naturally made sense that, hey, you could move into commercial or you could move into multifamily. You get a triple net property, and you know, you kind of had this game plan, which is you go ahead and you shift over to those, you have them for a few years, you either do some sort of cash out refinance, you go buy again, and it was kind of like once you were on that path, you were home free. Mm-hmm. What this pandemic has done has totally disrupted that game plan, because nobody knows now, unless you just have this huge war chest of money and you're going in and you are buying extremely low, you know, kind of like the Sam Zell approach. It's hard to do if you are an individual investor. And I think right now, because there are so many of the property types that are at risk, people, much to what Neil was saying, what Kevin was saying, people are frozen, and it's very hard to go. What used to seem like a good idea, hey, I'll sell multifamily, go to triple net. Now it's almost like they're going, wait a minute, I'm a little nervous with my triple net. How do I get back to multifamily, right? So it's just kind of was a big game changer from my perspective.
Yeah, well, it has been a big game changer. You know, we've had to figure out multiple different things. We've had clients calling us to see if we can repurpose certain things that they've had. We've had a couple of clients from office spaces are now asking us to redesign their interior of office spaces. So which we'd never thought, because they had actually called us to expand their office, you know, and then along the same way, it's like, hey, what can we redo to do this? And then we've got another client now. The reason I asked about the assisted living is we've had two clients that have had hotel projects, and they've owned the hotels. They tried to sell it for a while, and looks like they got approached by an assisted living company to see if they could do. So we got invited to kind of give them a game plan to see if that could be easily converted into assisted living, which is a perfect, easy example of transition between a hotel to an assisted living, because it's safer in the sense that most of the units could easily be converted into handicap accessibility, and secondly, you've got the air conditioning systems are not mixed, because each of them have their own individual air conditioning systems within depending on the type of the property. Some properties are different, but most of the properties have separate air conditioning systems. So for them, it becomes easy for them to share certain rooms, because then, you know, you're not sharing certain rooms. So they're all individual. So we're seeing that. So I don't know if there's any, that's why I asked about the assisted living. Was there any conversion going on, Neil? Or I know you've sort of ventured into the space recently, last few years, on the hospitality side, if there's anything you were seeing there.
Naveen, I was just thinking about something Kevin said just very quickly, and it maybe ties in, maybe not, but you know, I had a call from a client of mine a couple of weeks ago, and he had just canceled an escrow, not with us, fortunately, but he canceled an escrow with another seller, another brokerage firm. And I asked him what happened, because I knew he was under contract for a while. And basically, to cut right to the chase, he put that thing under contract based on certain financing that he was hoping to get. And then two different lenders over the course of about 45 days blew out of the loan. That one of them didn't want to make any loan. The other one cut the loan dollars so severely that he would have to put up a much, much larger down payment. And he didn't want to do that. But I I asked him, why he was so surprised that this happened. And he said, well, I brought them a deal that had been at 97, 98% occupied for the last 3 years. And the rents were, at or above market, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, you just answered your own question. Just because you were at 96, 98% occupancy and top of the market rents, neither lender believed that property would continue to move forward with that occupancy rate and those rents. So they probably stressed the deal a little bit, stressed the occupancy, stressed the rents. Their underwriting was way different, and they came up with different loan dollars, and he just couldn't do that. I think he said he was have to put up like another 800,000 or $1 million. Don't hold me to that. It wasn't my deal. But he said that's it. At that point, he just walked, and he got his earnest money back, thankfully. But I said this very recently, that anyone who takes a listing today, now that was pre-COVID when he started, but anybody who takes a listing today, and I'm sure Marty could speak to this, and you don't get that deal underwritten by a lender, preferably before you take the listing, if not shortly thereafter, I think you're going to be in for a rude awakening, because the broker on that deal, who thought he was cashing that check, by the way, said the broker who was representing him was the listing agent. So that broker is no longer cashing that check. And I think that seller is going to end up with that property back, because I don't think they're willing to sell it for what somebody's willing to pay for it. So I think in this day and age, we have to be really careful as brokers when we're taking deals to the market, that if it requires financing, we can get that financing. If it's all cash, I think you said this earlier, Naveen, cash is king. All the cash buyers I know want a deal. They're not going to pay retail for anything. They pulled this war chest together, and they want to do some good with it. So, they're not going to pay cash if it means paying retail. They're only going to pay cash if they're going to get a better deal. That doesn't really answer your question about the hospitality, but we've pulled back real quickly. We've pulled back a little bit on hospitality, just because everybody who wanted to sell their property changed their mind when we got into COVID. Some of them still want to sell, but now they can't get anywhere near the numbers we were talking before COVID. And my biggest fear, and again, something Marty could probably speak to, my biggest fear is I'm not even sure where to get hotel financing now. The top three or four lenders we had been talking to all pretty much pulled out. And there's only one maybe that's still even talking to us. And the loan dollars are just so much less now that it's really hard to make sense of some of these deals. So I don't know, we're not backing off entirely on hospitality. I still love that space. But gosh, the only one who's going to sell today is somebody who really has to sell, and they better be willing to cut the price, because I just don't see anybody paying retail for hospitality right now.
Yeah. Any of you seeing any sort of foreign investors that are coming in? Because I know besides what's happening here, we've had a few interested, groups out of Singapore, out of India, out of the Middle East that are really taking this opportunity to figure out if they can absorb some projects and properties, because I think they've been very cash rich over there, and they're really trying to figure out, hey, we can penetrate the market, which is sort of what happened in the 80s too, where you had the Japanese, come in and buy pretty much half of New York, if not, what they were trying to do back then. Is that any, I mean, of course, we're only talking regionally here, but anything you're seeing, Kevin, from outside foreign investors?
I've heard of groups forming private equity funds or family offices to take advantage of distress, but the real distress is not here yet, and it probably won't appear until sometime next year, because we still have government assistance to a lot of these operators and forbearance from lenders, but all those things will end at some point where someone's going to have to pay somebody. And then we'll see which properties have to be sold.
Yeah. Anything you're seeing, Marty?
No, I just hear it from a lot of the AREAA members. They're always looking to the beauty of AREAA is it's, connected to everywhere in the world. I'm starting to hear some things where some of the financial institutions, they're more and more selling their tapes on certain deals, like on multifamily,
Right.
where, and again, a lot of people won't know this, but they'll basically put together a whole bunch of their properties that maybe, you know, like 60%, 50% loan to value, and they'll sell that so they can basically get more cash in, and they'll make money on that deal. But there are people that literally have those kind of things going on, and the coupons aren't very great. I mean, they're probably under 4%, but with the risk that's at least implied, I think more and more of those kind of things will be prevalent. But again, like any tapes, whether it's on the lending side or, excuse me, the debt side, or if you're going to go buy the property, you just have to do your due diligence. So I see those kind of things. There's just an awful lot going on. And then you have always the dreamers that say they have all this money from a far country and they don't. But those are fun to figure out. Yeah. And I'm still stuck on the bed sheet thing. You threw me off with that. So.
Hey, it's a good analogy. I've always, you know,
there it is. You know, as long as you believe
well,
it.
and you know,
If you think that's a good analogy, you go with that. I mean, it's
yeah,
staying away from bed sheets.
Yeah. So, anything, Neil? So before I go to the topic of, I know one of the discussions that we all had prior, and we were talking about the collaborative effort of, you know, the lenders, the brokers, the buyers, you know, the sellers. I sort of wanted to sort of bring that back around to what the discussions, you know, the four of us had is about that. I mean, are you, you know, I'd like to sort of open it up to, you know, to all three of you to see, you know, what are you doing right now? What are you doing in terms of, you know, getting that collaborative effort going? Neil, you wanna start off, and then we'll kind of go back through the, you know, through the panels here.
Naveen, if you don't mind, I was really getting into the chat box and taking notes with all the people who are offering their services and so on. I'm writing about as quickly as I can. Can you just repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so the question is, the discussions we had, you know, regarding the collaborative effort between the lenders, the buyers, the brokers, and what are you guys doing as brokers and lenders to sort of be, you know, hands-on? Like, I know we talked about how, you know, if a deal needs to be done today, you know, it has to be a collaborative effort. There's definitely a compromise, but it's also, before a deal even happens, there has to be some sort of a understanding between, hey, will my lender lend this? You know, how are you reaching out to your lenders, or how are you reaching out to your clients, you know, to make that deal happen, you know, and we've talked about compromises on both sides. So it's truly going back to the original days of saying, hey, my lender can only lend so much. I think you were talking about some sort of seller financing and things like that. Maybe can you guys sort of see, you know, can kind of share some of the things that you're doing as, you know, in the industry to make these transactions work?
Naveen, I'm so glad you brought up seller financing, because I personally love seller financing. Every broker should love seller financing, because think about it. I mean, with all due respect to the mortgage brokers and lenders on the call, let's face it, if your buyer does not have to go through the application process, which depending on the deal type and the size and so on, can be quite voluminous. You know, a Fannie loan today, just the paperwork on that is, you know, a few inches thick. But again, if a buyer can get the seller to finance the deal, they save on origination fees, they save on third-party reports, they save on time. Time is money. And from a broker standpoint, it also means you're going to cash a check a lot quicker, because it shaves, you know, 60, 90 days easily, or if not more, off the life cycle of that deal. I love seller financing, and since you brought it up, we are starting to see sellers now who have the ability. Not everybody has the ability. If you have a $4 million loan on a $5 million property, there's really no seller financing available. But we have clients who own $2, $3, $4, $5 million properties with no debt. So they have the luxury of being able to offer seller financing. And if they're in that position, the second I find that out, I plant that seed, because I tell them, look, if you're in a position and willing to finance the deal, it's going to save a ton of time. Plus, it may make the difference between the deal closing and not closing. So I think that's really important. You brought up seller financing. The other thing I'll say very quickly is this. The world has changed a little bit, you know, and from a brokerage standpoint, it's no different. I said this the other day when the four of us were on the call. You know, a lot of brokers, and I'm not singling anybody out, but it's just true. A lot of brokers were very spoiled up until a few months ago because the market was going to the moon. And, you know, they were listing stuff as quickly as they could. Anything that wasn't nailed down was getting listed, where the seller wanted to sell it, of course, was getting listed. And you didn't have to give a whole lot of thought to price. I mean, price is important, but the market was going up. So if you overpriced it the day you got the listing, just wait a while and the market will catch up. I even had a broker tell me that. He said, I don't mind overpricing a property as long as it's not too overpriced because the market's going to catch up in the next few months anyway. That's an interesting business plan. You know, then they didn't have to worry about the financing because let's face it, you know, everybody who's dealt with lenders knows that lenders were throwing money, literally throwing money at these deals. A lot of those lenders, I think, are going to live to regret that because some of the money they threw was probably, you know, not the wisest use of their money. So today, and I know Marty talked about this the other day, I think Kevin, all of us did, you know, before you even pick up the phone, you really need to understand your seller's situation, their needs, their objectives, their wants, and you need to approach that call a whole lot differently because there's no more throwing everything up against the wall and until something sticks. I think everything needs to be approached a lot more intelligently, a lot more methodically. You really have to really ask the additional questions that, you know, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, didn't need to be asked. But you really got to dig deep, get into the weeds, really understand that situation, how it's operating, whether it's performing or not, you know, the income side, the expense side, the seller's motivation for selling. You know, if they don't have to sell, they probably, well, they maybe should reconsider selling. I know brokers don't like to hear that, but now might not be the best time to sell if you don't have to sell. That old, you know, you can't lose if you hang on to it that we talked about a little while ago. But if you're going to be in the business and you're going to try to make money as a broker, I think you just have to be a little bit more thoughtful. You have to, if you don't come across that you care, and you're not going to be any different than the last four people that called that owner. They want somebody who can help them. They want somebody who can solve the problems. They want somebody who genuinely has their best interest at heart. And if you don't come across in that regard in your first few minutes, you're right. Done.
So Neil, so then as for all the other panelists, you know, for all the other attendees here, so I mean, educate us a little bit more. Like, so do you as the broker in charge, do you sort of reach out and say, hey, you know, whether you're on the selling side or the buying side, do you sort of broach the subject and do you have those conversations up front to say, hey, will you provide seller financing for, you know, if you're selling this building, or if you're approaching another broker that's actually having the listing, are you going to go out and say, hey, you know what, so how does that conversation happen? Educate us a little bit so people can understand, you know, how that's done.
Well, I'm not saying necessarily that they're the easiest conversations in the world to happen or to have, but I think they have to happen. I think they have to be had. Those conversations have to be had because otherwise, what are you doing? If you're doing things the old way, you know, pre-COVID, let's call it the old way, you know, you're giving a lot less regard, in many cases, very little regard to how the property is operating, why the seller's selling, all those things we talked about before. Today, you have to get in the weeds. You have to, first of all, if you really truly care about that seller and their situation, it's going to happen naturally. You're going to be asking questions you may not have had to ask before because, like that broker friend of mine said, you could totally screw up, overprice a thing, and the market will catch up sooner or later. If you keep the listing long enough, it's going to catch up, you're going to sell. Well, I tell everybody here, and I practice this myself, you know, if you're going to pick up the phone, you know, understand that that person might be hurting. That person may have lost a loved one. That person could be out of work. That person could have friends and family who are out of work that they're now supporting. You know, there's all kinds of things that you didn't have to think about just 5-6 months ago that you do have to think about now. I just think you have to ask more questions, let the property owner do a lot more talking, and if that conversation progresses naturally, all the things you need to know will come out. You'll know, or you'll ask at the appropriate time, whether they own it free and clear or whether they have a loan. What kind of loan do they have? You know, why do you want to sell the property? If you sell the property, are you going to do a 1031 exchange, or are you going to pay Uncle Sam and call it a day? You got to ask. You should have been asking those questions anyway, mind you, pre-COVID. But if you're not asking them now, I mean, forget it, because the next person to call, or the next one, somebody is going to treat that client right and ask the right questions, and they're going to come away with the business, and you're going to be scratching your head saying, wow, why didn't I get that business? Well, you're still using the old methodology. And I personally, this is just me personally, everything I say is me personally, I don't think the old methodology and the old approach works in this current environment. That's just my opinion.
And Kevin, any suggestions on those kind of things, like the collaborative effort of having, you know, what are you doing, or what are you seeing in your area, in your industry right now?
Well, it's always important to collaborate with all the service providers that you need to complete a transaction, whether it's a surveyor, environmental people, lenders, title companies. There's always problems that come up that need to be solved. And, you know, having good relationships with these vendors usually get your deal home.
Marty, are you any brokers approaching you for kind of figuring out, hey, we're going to be working in these transactions here and these are the parameters? Or
All the time. I mean, that's how I ended up getting that whole strategic moniker from years ago. We've been doing this forever. It's like my brokers, they just call me and say, hey, here's what I'm working on. What do you think? And we start going through it, and then we set up a meeting with the client. And whether it's on the selling side or the buying side, we're literally we treat it, real estate is, it's a financial planning. And we're trying to figure out, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the choices? Like Neil was saying, private money, seller financing, everything is available. We just need to know what the clients, depending on which side of the equation they're on, are willing to do or looking to do. If they want to get CD type returns, or old day CD type returns, I should say, then we bring, that's another thing we're going to discuss. We're also, and this has been going on for years, I've always been telling people, don't get too over leveraged in case we ever have a market change, because you don't want to have some surprises that end up you lose the property. And I think, to me, this is the way brokers and lenders, I don't really see myself as a lender or a lember, I like that, but I don't see myself in that role. I see us as, we're doing consultation with people, trying to figure out what's in their best interest. And if it makes sense for them to do something, we do it. If it doesn't make sense, we don't. It's like, deals are going to be done if and only if they're the right thing to do. And
but wasn't this supposed to be what, I mean, the word broker, I know has different connotations in different cultures, but the whole commercial side of or even residential, it doesn't matter, you're someone representing a buyer or seller. I think the whole thing in the days, the art of the deal making was all about making sure that we could collaborate together and see what the seller can do, what the buyer can do, or either way on either side, to see how to best represent each other's clients, but to make sure that, this is not just about, oh, I have a listing, I'm just going to sell. And that was the whole point about representing each side in the best way possible and figuring out where the funding comes within this institution side of it. It's not just about a cash buyer having cash to kind of do a quick close, but it's also about leveraging what they have to be able to say, hey, you don't need to put the cash. We can kind of you could put some cash, and this is kind of what the leverage could be, so we can actually make it all work as a transaction, correct?
Well, there's a little bit, I mean, I think, again, this just goes back to what their objectives are. But I think the other part that's coming up today that really I didn't pay much attention to before, and it's important now, is every deal, I want to know what's going on the rent roll. Because I need to know who's been paying, who hasn't, who's asked for concessions. We need all of that information up front before we go and, let's say, in effect, look for lenders that this may fit. And because things have changed, that information is critical to the whole deal. And so we might as well do everything we can up front and try to figure out what's the exact situation. And going back to what Neil said, it may be best just to sit tight and not bring the property to the market until we get through, you know, and again, we don't know whether that's 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. We get through this thing and things calm down a little. That's why I'm hoping people aren't going to be forced into these, you know, like fire sales, because I mean that's horrible. They're going to lose much of the wealth that they worked so hard to build in the first place.
Well, I know it's 2 o'clock right now. We've got I know we talked about this before, and I know it's so hard to predict the future, but I want to kind of go back to all of you and see, you know, it's going to be hard to predict, but I do understand that. What are you seeing in terms of things that may happen or may not happen? If that's something that you guys want to talk about, I'd love to sort of, you know, go back to maybe Kevin and start with Kevin again and see, you know, what are the things that you think will happen, or, you know, is the strategy that's moving forward? If that's something you can touch on and talk a little bit about, or or maybe even just in your market, you know, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think, you know, macro, I mean, just for the whole country, I think depending on how long the pandemic lasts, everyone talks about what is the new normal. Right now, downtown San Francisco is like a ghost town. You can't go back to the high-rise offices. And even if they let you go back, do you want to stand with 15 other people in a crowded elevator just to get up and down 50 stories? So what we're hearing is that companies are thinking about how do we reopen in a safe environment, and maybe that includes moving some of their operations to suburban locations, you know, low-rise office spaces where they control the whole. It's a single tenant where they don't have to share it with other people. All these things are being discussed on how companies reopen and get their workers back in place. And then a lot of these tech companies, they're saying, Twitter said, well, we're okay with everybody working from home. You know, they have a huge office footprint in the city. What's going to happen to that space? You know, I mean, when you talk about adaptive reuse, that's going to be big, depending on how people's behavior changes because of this. I mean, hotels, B and C hotels probably become affordable housing or homeless housing or something like that. You know, I mean, which they are now. They're being rented by the city to house the homeless, to get them off the street. So these are all things that we're going to have to think about. What is the new normal going forward? And, you know, that's kind of, we're talking about retail where all these companies are going bankrupt or unable to reopen. The United States is the most over-retailed country in the world. We have 50 feet of retail per person in the United States. And that's huge compared to any other country. So all that space has to be either redesigned for another use. And that's your job, Navin.
I know I think when our retail is literally stopped, we have not done a retail project since last year. Excuse me. But yeah, there's been a lot of redesign. There's been a lot. We've had another group that approached us to see how they could convert their existing strip mall into a different use. And I think a lot of drive-throughs are being very popular. So a lot of these people are trying to look at corner properties or corner of strips to convert them into drive-throughs, or they're demoing part of their existing strip to incorporate drive-through. And then the drive-through components are changing as well, where I think we just got a note from the city the other day that, you know, they're trying to change the rule because of all these drive-throughs are creating accidents on the street, because a lot of these, you know, there's line off, you know, because all Starbucks is closed and they're not, but it's all drive-through now. So there's a lot of different things happening, and I do see lots of conversions happening. We collaborated with another architectural firm in town in Phoenix. We're converting an office space, which is on 7th Street, Neil, that was that property for sale forever. which was, and then that's now converted into multifamily. One of my very close friends, an architect of mine, a friend of mine, he and I are working on that project, and it's pretty good. We converted a office suite into a 36-unit multifamily. It's a pretty cool project. But anyway, so those are the conversions we're seeing. But we're going to see more and more on this. Marty, what are you seeing for the future here?
Well, that's a tough one because as Kevin was talking about San Francisco, and I'm sitting here going, okay, so high rises, negative. People are not going to want to go in there because, you know, for the most of those elevators, you can put about 4 people in them at once, and they'll probably have tape on the floor. And so if indeed those high rises, you know, start to come down in value, I mean, the ripple effect is what gets my attention, because San Francisco is a great example of, you know, property taxes really get, the bulk of it, I believe, will come from the commercial world. And if commercial values start to drop in San Francisco, which means now they don't have enough funds for normal services, then you start to, what goes in my head is San Francisco has both a great reputation and a horrible reputation, which is it can be a wonderful city for all of its diversity, but it also can be certain parts of it a pig pen. And if you can't pay for normal services because all of a sudden you're not getting revenues, now I'm starting to wonder, what's going to go with budgets? And then you go to the state. So I think there may be a chance we'll see people leaving some of these major cities. And then we get that effect to residential and everything else. And again, if we resolve this thing quickly, we'll be fine. If this lingers and we don't have a cure, then it's going to put more and more pressure on things. And so I would think some of the cities around the US will be like what Kevin was saying, where maybe you have 2-story office buildings in Austin, Texas, which is Austin's a beautiful town, but 2 stories in Austin versus 2 stories in San Francisco, you know, it's like night and day the cost. And so as we might see some cities and areas benefit, and we might see some of the more dense areas struggle. And then we already have challenges in some of these denser cities anyway, just from services, the pressure in the inner cities, et cetera. So I'm a little concerned on the ripple effect. I won't lie. In the future, it could be very interesting. We'll still have a bunch of deals we all do, but I think there'll be a shift to some wealth.
Yeah. Neil?
No, I agree with both Kevin and Marty wholeheartedly. You know, the thing about the city, I mean, Phoenix is in San Francisco, but I do agree it's going to be a long time before you see 15 people crowding into an elevator or 15 people crowding into anything. I think it may also be a long time before you see parents willing to let all their kids splash around in the pool together. That's going to affect, you know, hotels and hospitality. And just, if you think about every single property type, there's something that's probably going to change about how that property type does business, or how the tenants do business and so on. And so Naveen, I think you're right on the money here, thinking, you know, looking forward. And as Marty says, the ripple effect, you know, what we're seeing today is just the tip of the iceberg. Trying to predict with any certainty at all what's going to happen in 6, 12, 18, 24 months is one thing. Trying to predict how it's going to change the world and change the way we do business as we know it. You know, we're talking about office buildings. We're talking about a flight of people from the cities to the suburbs. We're talking about repurposing. I think repurposing, I said this the other day to you, Naveen, repurposing is, I think it's where it's at. A lot of these buildings, as you drive around, whether it's Phoenix or Austin or San Francisco or wherever you happen to be right now, as you drive around, all of us could probably pick a dozen or more properties pretty easily that no longer need to be that property type or that use, and probably won't be, in many cases, probably won't be in the next few years. That repurposing is I think brilliant in this time. It was brilliant before COVID, but it's going to be especially brilliant during and as we come out of COVID. The other thing I was going to say is, I think just going into this in general, The market didn't need everything that it had. I mean, let's face it, they were building multifamily all over the United States at an incredible clip. I'm not even sure we needed all that multifamily. And I'm not sure that based on the rents they were asking, there were enough people to fill that multifamily. Same thing with office. They were continuing to build office. Now what are they going to do? Some of those projects may never be finished. What do you turn those into? I think Marty made a good point, or Kevin, turning some of this stuff into housing or homeless housing or something is brilliant. The question is, can it be done? The economics come into play. There's a bank involved. There's an owner involved. There's a lot that has to happen for an owner and a bank to allow their office building to be turned into homeless housing or something. But I think it's great, just in general. I think it's great we're having these conversations because, everyone is hypothesizing, and a lot of what we're saying is going to come true. Some of it won't. But it's important that we're having these discussions, because if you keep thinking in the past, as a broker anyway, or as anybody in this space, I just don't think you're going to do very well. I think you're not going to fare very well, because you have to think the way Marty's thinking. You have to think the way Kevin's thinking. You have to be able to look into the future, which is so hard to do, and say, what's going to happen to office? What's going to happen to shopping centers? Kevin's comment about 50 square feet per person, I don't even think I knew that, but now that he said it, it makes perfect sense. What's going to happen to multifamily? What's going to happen to single family? I know we have residential realtors on the phone that I don't think they're having much difficulty at all. The housing seems to be selling at a rapid clip. But what's going to happen to, as Kevin said earlier, the household deformation? That certainly is going to affect residential sales as much as multifamily and everything else. I know it's fascinating. It's a fascinating, incredibly exhilarating time to be in this business. It's also a little scary. Anybody who says it's not a little scary is lying, because if you lose your entire pipeline and you got to rebuild it, that's a scary thing. We might lose it a second time. Some of us may lose our pipeline twice. That's a scary thing. But Naveen, kudos to you for pulling this together. I think this was a great thing for you to do. You're doing a great job as the commercial chair. I've learned a lot. I always think I know a lot going into these things, but I learn a lot just listening to other people. And frankly, looking at the chat box and seeing some of the comments in there, you'll learn a lot. So
I
want to thank everyone
it,
for the participation today. I think this was a great call.
Thank you. And just to give an update, I know some of you know already, we are very involved in the cannabis industry. We have seen nothing but an uptick in cannabis space. They have been deemed an essential commodity and also an essential business. And so we've had numerous clients trying to expand, especially the fact that I know California is legal already, but many other states are getting legalized. And also medical is going into many licenses being issued from Illinois to, Missouri to, I was just in Missouri last week or earlier this week. And so there's a lot going on in that space. So for those that are interested, I know we're going to have a few more of these. And that leads to our next event, which I think Ritu is going to moderate next month. I believe it's the first or second Thursday of next month. So please look out for the update coming up. And we're going to have another panel on multifamily and on hospitality and what's happening in that. We've got some amazing speakers coming up. But no, the reason I want to do this is not just to educate, but also give an opportunity for everybody to get online and literally in the participant, there's a lot of different things I see happening. I haven't seen any questions on Q&A here, but I think this is going to be great for all of you to sort of use as a resource. And please connect. You can always within the chat box, you can private message anybody or get any information from anybody. I thought we could. Are you saying no, Marty?
From what I can see, I don't believe you could. We were trying to do that, but somehow I think that may have fallen through the cracks, unless somebody is able to do that.
Yeah. But if you need anybody's information, maybe, you can always put it in there, or everybody can share their own information of what they do. That way, or you could have whatever, if there's a product that you're looking for, maybe you can put those on too. I guess that's super said, no direct chat here.
Right.
But I do encourage all of you guys to find out about each other. And I know we're trying to push the agenda here to see what else is going on. And we'll have more of these once a month just to kind of get you all on the same page. And we want to sort of really have a diverse conversation nationwide. So we'll have people from the Northeast next time. And I don't know, Ritu, can you turn yourself on, and do you want to speak a few words on this?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My internet keeps cutting out. That's why my face isn't there. But yeah, I think this session was really good. And the next month, as Naveen had mentioned, I'll be moderating a panel on hospitality. So there's a lot going on in that space. None of it good, unfortunately, right now. But we're going to be talking to some real experts that are living and breathing it day in and day out. So, look forward to hosting next month. And
sure. And then
I'm really happy that we were able to do this. Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you, Ritu. We're also looking at partnering with Icsc as well. I reached out to Jasmine, and hopefully we can get some people to talk about what's really happening in the retail and all those areas as well. So we've been collaborating, nationwide with different groups, and we hope to bring you more and more ideas of what's happening now, and just to kind of get a beat of what's happening currently in the States. So,
Hey, Naveen.
Yeah.
It's Neil. Real quickly, Steve Hayashi had a question in the chat box about 1031 exchanges with seller financing. Just because I thought we were at the end of our call, I answered him in the chat box and asked him if he told me he could send me an email, because we've handled a number of seller financed 1031 exchanges in the past. I can also put him in touch with one of the accommodators we use. So I just wanted you to know that was in the chat box. I answered him, and if he wants more information, he can drop me an email.
Okay. No, sounds good. Thank you for doing that. And if there's anything else, any last words, panelists? Kevin?
Well, I hope everyone stays safe. I hope to see everyone at an AREAA event soon in person. And remember, wear your mask.
Thank you. And Marty?
Well, I just want everybody to know that I continually like to put that kitchen as my backdrop, much like Kevin's Golden Gate. I've found a way to do that, so that's always my virtual background. I know you guys appreciate seeing that.
Thank you, Marty. Neil?
I've got nothing else to say. I saw a couple of other questions in the chat box. Is there going to be a hospitality program? Somebody's asking about a hospitality program.
Yes, I'm going to be doing that next month. We're going to do, it's just on hospitality, and then the month after we'll touch on, the retail and the multifamily.
So Ritu, Michelle was asking if you could send that invitation to attendees. I'm guessing that answer is yes.
Yeah, we will.
Yes,
I think
absolutely. We'll go out once we nail down a date. I have some invitation speakers, so I'm just waiting for confirmations before we sit down the date.
Yeah. And also, I think we have somebody asking about the cannabis webinar. That would be, we're still working out details. I haven't planned on one, but we have a lot of large MSOs that can talk about. I need to sit with the board and figure out what we could do on that as well. I think it's Michelle asking about that. But with that said, also we're going to have a virtual national conference. I think some of you may know. But just for all the commercial people on the call here and on the Zoom, we're going to have at least 4 to 5 events on the commercial side only. So it's going to be a very interesting format. We're still working out the details, so please look out for that. It'll be sometime in October. And so we are definitely going to be really involved this time, because we've got a different format. We'll have our own, chat rooms and things like that, which I know the technology side is being worked behind the scenes right now. So with that said, thank you all for coming today. I think it's been a great discussion, and Kevin, Marty, and Neil, I really thank you for your time and what you do for AREAA. I really, really appreciate it, all the time you guys spend for us. And with that, I don't know, Jazz, Vanessa, are we good?
Yep, we're good. All right, bye everyone.
Bye. Thank you again. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Naveen.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.